stay and watch it. No. Oh, we dream about all things being alright, but we freeze when it's all up to us. So let's fight it, make a stand and try it. Everything will matter from now on. Matter from now on. Let's fight it, there's no way to hide it, 'cause everything will matter from now on. 'Cause it's high time. No matter from now on.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining. I am independent journalist Georgia Fort. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. As many of you know, on Friday, I was one of just two journalists who were inside of the courtroom when Judge Peter K. Hill sentenced Derek Chauvin to 22 and a half years in prison. And to be inside of the courtroom during that moment in a lot of ways was surreal. Following the trial, having been inside the courtroom on other days, there was something just different about sentencing. And I think as I reflected on it over the weekend, the biggest difference was this was the first time that we ever heard Derek Chauvin acknowledge the Floyd family. And he didn't say much. In fact, he said he couldn't say much because he's still under investigation for federal charges. Take a listen to what he did say, though. A lot of people have been trying to decipher exactly what he meant. Take a listen.
Mr. Chauvin, this is your opportunity if you wish to give any input to the court. And so I turn it over to you and your attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
What did he mean? What did he mean that there's going to be some information that will give you some peace of mind? And so a lot of people have been trying to decipher, is he referring to the federal charges? Was he already aware? Maybe what to expect from the sentencing? It was a little cryptic. And so, Black Twitter had a field day with that, trying to decipher exactly what he meant. But I think even more concerning was his mother's statement. Take a listen to what she had to say.
I am the mother of Derek Chauvin. I am here to speak on behalf of my entire family. On November 25th, 2020, not only did Derek's life change forever, but so did mine and my family's. Derek devoted 19 years of his life to the Minneapolis Police Department. It has been difficult for me to hear and read what the media, public, and prosecution team believe Derek to be an aggressive, heartless, and uncaring person. I can tell you that is far from the truth. My son's identity has also been reduced to that as a racist. I want this court to know that none of these things are true and that my son is a good man. Derek always dedicated his life and time to the police department. Even on his days off, he would call in to see if they needed help. Derek is a quiet, thoughtful, honorable, and selfless man. He has a big heart, and he always has put others before his own. The public will never know the loving and caring man he is, but his family does. Even though I have not spoken publicly, I have always supported him 100% and always will.
So that there is the first time that we're ever hearing from Derek Chauvin's mother. She addressed his character, but what she did not address was the Floyd family. Joining us now is managing partner Lee Hutton. Lee, I know that you have followed this case very closely as an attorney. When you heard that Judge Cahill was sentencing Derek Chauvin to 22 and a half years, what was your initial response?
My initial response was, oh my gosh, this is yet another reflection of kind of the court system, professionals not acknowledging the historical pain and suffering that people of color have gone through since America's beginning. This is the last blemish of this country that we have not gotten away from. And if I can give you some statistics, there's 26,000 practicing lawyers in Minnesota. Only 1.8% are people of African American heritage. And that just goes to show that that 1.8% has a hard time of changing how we think about things in the courtroom. So yes, when I heard the 22 years, I was disappointed.
And like to expand on that, right? 22 and a half years in Minnesota is the longest we've seen at least any cop sentenced, right? So for some, they feel like this is a milestone. It's accountability. He didn't get off. He didn't get probation, and that's what his defense attorney was asking for. But what would have been a more fitting sentence for the crime that was committed here?
And that's a great question because I've been asked that. And what I do is I go back to the elements. Is number one, did he abuse his badge? Yes. Number two, did he do this in front of the presence of children? Well, we heard their testimony. Number three, did he do it with such particular cruelty? We saw it on film. And so if you put the elements to each of those categories, and then you connect that to the result of an individual who died before our eyes, and this is not a quick death, Georgia. This is not a gunshot and somebody falls to the ground. This is 9 minutes of complete disregard for a human's life. Now, one thing that this trial did not reflect was the element that George Floyd was, in fact, an African-American male. Had it done that, then I would even be more upset if they got 22 years without considering the hate of another person's skin color.
Yeah. Well, and being in the courtroom, there were a lot of nuances that didn't get picked up on camera. For instance, we see Chauvin turn around and address the family, but you never really see their responses. And there were moments, to be exact, one moment when Chauvin's mother was speaking that one of Floyd's relatives got up and walked out. And there was another moment when attorney Eric Nelson was talking that the nephew of George Floyd got up and walked out. Take a listen to what Eric Nelson was saying that just really rubbed their family the wrong way.
Derek Chauvin was not even scheduled to work on May 25th, 2020. He volunteered because there was short staffing at the time. I know from numerous conversations that I've had with Derek that his brain is littered with what ifs. What if I just had not agreed to go in that day? What if things had gone differently? What if I never responded to that call? What if, what if, what if? The truth of the matter is, and the end result is that we are here after a jury verdict, finding him guilty of these offenses, and the court's consideration should not only be focused on the aggravating factors, but the mitigating factors as well. Derek Chauvin spent 19 years.
And so it's interesting because he threw out the what ifs. What if Derek Chauvin didn't go into work that day? What if George Floyd didn't go to Cup Foods? What if none of this ever happened? It's something that we've been talking about leading up to the sentencing, because this was such a monumental case for American history. It has been described as the the center of this racial reckoning. In your line of work as an attorney, have you all talked about the implications that this case is going to have on America in 20 years?
And golly, what another great pathway! And I hope there's a lot of corporations listening, a lot of industries. I've always said one of the things that I do as an attorney is very impactful because attorneys shape the way people socially interact with one another. No other profession has that responsibility or the dignity to be able to do that. Unfortunately, there hasn't been wide-scale discussions in the industry at large. There's been discussions with attorneys of color, but those discussions happened in their household when we're taught to be careful when we get pulled over by the cop. And so, unfortunately, I haven't seen much change in the legal profession and or corporate America after this. It's reflective in corporations donating money in the name of George Floyd, or at least promising to do so. I think there's been a calculation of $4 billion with the being promised, but only 200 million has actually been paid. And so, this is the most important case. And I think the sentencing, we'll have to see how the reactions afterwards, the what ifs that Eric Nelson was discussing, which was completely insulting, because we have to wake up as people of color. What if I wasn't Black? What if I didn't get encouraged to come to Minnesota, which was promised to be the land of milk and honey? Those are the what ifs that people of color have to deal with every day. And the what ifs needs to be to stop and turn into what if accountability was our priority? What if equality was our priority? That's the what ifs we should be considering.
Absolutely. And Benjamin Dixon is going to join us now. Ben, I know that this was also a case you followed very closely as well. What were your thoughts when you saw that Chauvin was being sentenced to 22 and a half years?
I did feel that this was there's a balancing act that a lot of us have, especially if you are on the side of the abolition of the prison industrial complex. So you're not really in favor of the prison system, but you are in favor of accountability. And so it was good to see that we got this far in terms of accountability. But I'm constantly reminded of what my dear friend Noah Changa, who's an activist and organizer in Atlanta, what she said. She said, real justice isn't a guilty verdict. Real justice is stopping them from killing us in the first place. And I do. I'm sorry, Georgia. That, and then if it's okay, I want to ask. I want to ask our guests a question about your process in all this, because I'm really fascinated with the different avenues for justice and how we move the ball now, because we haven't seen the kind of change that we would expect this monumental year to culminate in. We haven't seen it. We're still begging for it. We're still protesting for it. We're still demanding it. How do we get this ball moving? Because as big as this has been world changing, but it hasn't been legislation changing bit.
Exactly. Unfortunately, our justice system is connected so much to the world of capitalism. And what I mean by that is, you look at Jerry Blackwell, who is my mentor, who by far is one of the best attorneys, if not the best attorney in America. And he and I had a similar track of trying to and have been successful at some of the large law firms, but because of the institutional issues that attorneys of color have to deal with, we started our own private practices. cases. And we thrived because we have no other avenue but just to be great. And Jerry Blackwell proved it time and time again. Now, where I connect that capitalism into the courtroom and justice is that we as a group have to not only advocate and mobilize on the ground, but we have to stop giving our resources to companies and to individuals that don't hire people of color. Yeah, it's fine to donate and it's fine to take those resources, but you really have to put your actions into hiring attorneys of color. And here's why it's so important. Because if Jerry Blackwell had not been in that courtroom, I can say this with a lot of confidence as being in the legal side, this case may not have ended up in a victory. And so think about the Jerry Blackwells and the Lee Huttons and other fantastic attorneys of color who are not in the courtroom advocating for these very important issues, whether it be just a breach of contract or civil rights litigation. If we're not in a courtroom, we don't give it that extra special identity because we're people of color. And again, there's only 1.8% of African-American attorneys in Minnesota. Now think about how change is going to come in the courtroom when less than 5% of your African-American attorneys are not even getting hired for many of the cases. You know, thank God that Keith Ellison was in office during this time.
Right.
When you said capitalism and you tied it into that, I felt that deep in my spirit because I honestly feel that as Black people in this country, we've not only had to survive white supremacy, we've had to also survive how capitalism intersects. And one of the most malicious places that we've seen this intersection is in the justice in the justice system. You seem, Attorney Hutton, you seem like a person who has a very clear understanding of how your identity intersects with class as it pertains to this legal system. Is that perhaps what they're terrified of in the teaching of critical race theory, the fact that it will spread that type of intersectionality and that kind of knowledge base that helps people understand not only their place in this society, in this country as a Black person, but also as a working person?
Absolutely, because anytime you have a ship that has no motor but has the sail, it needs wind behind it to move forward. And that wind, when I was a young attorney, I had no mentors, zero. That was able to reflect the profession as a young male of color. I had none. There was nobody to look to. Thank God that Jerry was at least around for me to call him. And Jerry and I had no connection other than, I just knew he was out there and he gave up his time, not for me, just for me, but for everybody. Now, putting that into more perspective, it's kind of, if you can't see it, you can't achieve it, or you don't believe it. And so when Jerry Blackwell was on TV and young individuals of color saw the victory, now they are encouraged to go to law school. Now they are encouraged to also be participants in the fight. And that's what we need is, especially with the critical race theory, is because hopefully when my kids and kids of their age get older, this concept of equality actually means something, to the extent that the past is erased. I come from Texas, and I had to fight in school to be in honors classes. I had to take test after test after test when teachers told me that there's no way that I would be a lawyer. There was no way that I would be successful. And so hearing that in the classroom when teachers themselves don't understand not just the negative response or the obstacle that someone has to face in everyday lives. These are not just everyday challenges. These are crippling effects on our kids of color, which destroy their soul to the point that there's no avenue to go that's positive. And you basically remove the choice from that individual. And once you remove the choice, your destiny is either the prison system, unfortunately, or it's death. And so
Wow.
those are choices that America has historically given to Black people. And unfortunately, we've been strong enough to endure as a race and as a people to navigate those choices, but the fight still continues.
If you all are just joining us this morning, we are joined by attorney and managing partner Lee Hutton, talking about the sentence that came down on Friday. As one of two journalists who was inside of that courtroom, the other thing that really stood out to me is just how hard Ellison and Blackwell had to fight for George's humanity, because we saw week after week, day after day, Attorney Nelson dehumanize and criminalize George Floyd, as we have seen the criminal justice system do to so many Black men. I want you guys to take a listen to a clip that they played from his daughter. She's only 7 years old. You may remember she's a little girl who said, "My daddy changed the world." But I think this was a powerful moment. They used this video recording as her victim impact statement, and it brought many of us to tears. Take a listen.
What do you miss most about your daddy?
Well, I ask about him all the time. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. Well, when you ask about him, what are you asking about?
Well, I was asking, how did my dad get hurt?
Do you wish that he was still here with us?
Yeah, but he is.
And that part
Through his
right
spirit.
there brought me so much joy.
Yes.
It's
And
devastating
when you see your
have
daddy
to hear a 7-year-old recount why her dad isn't here, trying to come to some understanding. Lee, I was reminded also, after the sentencing came down, community gathered outside and there was a protest. 1 down, 3 to go. What do you anticipate is going to be the outcome for the trial of the other 3 officers who are charged for George Floyd's murder?
Well, the only thing that can give me peace with the statement that Chauvin said at the end is if he was connecting that to a plea in which he would testify against those other 3 officers that would not present this trial from being tried all over again. So I hope that's the case. And then those 3 would also receive accountability. Now, if that doesn't happen, I think the 3 officers are going to have a hard time because they're connected to the guilty verdict to win. But again, in our justice system, there's been some stranger things. And so the prosecution really needs to put on not just the same job they did with Chauvin, but I think they're going to have to do an extraordinary job with these 3, because these 3 are going to shift themselves away from accountability by saying that they were just listening to Chauvin, and therefore there should be some sympathy that is brought to it. So I think, quite frankly, their actions was no different than Chauvin's. You saw it on the video. At any point in time, somebody's human conscience that is also motivated by the badge in your custody, in my custody, in my care, should have removed Chauvin from George Floyd's neck, and then none of us would be here. So I think they're just as accountable.
I'm thinking about earlier we spoke about the dehumanization that the defense attorney they had to dehumanize George Floyd all over again, and you think about those officers that are getting ready to face accountability, how little they could have really thought of the human being that was underneath Derek Chauvin's knee. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead. Speak to that.
Well, and that even goes back forward, and that's the fight when I put on a suit when you guys have this journalism show. It's the lack of humanity that we've put in our dues to be professionals, and now you take the everyday. You take off the suit, you go to the store, and that you can see somebody suffering. And what you're taught, because I have to imagine that Minneapolis police officers are taught to protect. They're taught to not allow somebody to endure such pain and suffering. I mean, while he was not in the tree like the Strange Fruit song by Billie Holiday was, I mean, this was a lynching that we saw in America
Yeah.
in front of camera, and you can't persuade me otherwise. And you see the inhumanity that they did to this man. And I have to say, very frankly, it was because he was a person of color in a neighborhood that they also have dehumanized in that area, and collecting all that into their brains of what ifs and connecting that to the defense that George Floyd died because his heart was too big is just insulting beyond belief. And I'll even say this. Many, many years ago, the police union has an insurance company that hires attorneys like Eric Nelson. Many, many attorneys of color have said, hey, we're great defense attorneys. We can look at things from different angles. Please hire us. Since the beginning of time, to my knowledge, they have never hired a person of color. Now,
Wow.
it would be extremely difficult for a person of color to have defended a case like this. But this is the reason why you have people of color in the rooms to say that defense is not only insulting, but it's not going to happen. We are going to defend this case in a judicious way, in a way that the Constitution allows, and in a way that is respectful for all sides. Not this, we're going to put up a defense until we lose, and then maybe give some half thought out apology at the end. And kind of this last statement by Chauvin, which I was looking at a documentary with Charles Manchin and other ones, and as they were leaving the courtroom, they kind of looked over their shoulder and gave this ridiculous kind of last statement, kind of beware. That's what I connected to Chauvin's statement, was here's a last statement, be careful, beware. I hope I'm wrong, but from time to time again, history has repeated itself in the courtroom.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it felt like his mom had some dog whistles in there when she started talking about pinning his badge on. And so very, very interesting day in court. Lee, I want to thank you so much for joining us this
Thank you.
morning. I feel like we could continue this conversation. There's so much more I want to ask you, but we are on the clock. So hopefully we can have you back again sometime in the future.
Anytime. You guys have a great show and continue the good work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And for those of you watching, keep it here for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.
fight. Just picked up some bands, come again. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Yeah, I'm the running man, rapping rubber bands. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Swerving, making plays, cool Ferrari red. Never out my zone, touchdown in my hands. Only fam around me, I can't have no friends. Had to cut you off, you left me out for dead. Ever since I was a teen, had prices on my head. Had to cut you off, you left me out for dead. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Just picked up some bands, come again. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Yeah, I'm the running man, rapping rubber bands. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Just picked up some bands, come again. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Yeah, I'm the running man.
Don't feel right. I still wanna party with her. Oh yeah. Even when it don't feel right. You know I'ma party with her. We been chillin' off the Wednesday, slept until it's Thursday. She don't wanna leave me, not just yet. Told me all about last Friday, when she went all crazy. Didn't go to bed till Saturday. I don't wanna go without, so I asked her to stay. Though she broke my heart in a million ways, but I'm putting that aside now. I'ma feel alright now, happy just as long as she's with me. I've been trying my hand every day of the week, yeah. With my baby, what's up? Always down every weekend. No, love her too much, but I just can't get enough. She's slipping through the cracks.
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Good morning, and welcome to Like It or Not, where we are free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. Today is Monday, June 28th, 2021. I'm Benjamin Dixon, and I am excited to be joined by none other than independent journalist Georgia Fort and professor historian. Well, you know, again, I will give the disclaimer because as you state, you are not an official historian, but you are our historian, Brother Carl Mack. Thank you both for joining and sitting in with us this morning.
Pleasure.
Absolutely. Good morning.
Good morning, Sister Fort.
I've been wanting to get the two of you to meet, and shout out to everyone in the chat rooms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all the places that we are streaming. Good morning from Rebecca and from James. Now, DJ Exclusive, who's normally here with us, he's under the weather, so he's taking some time this morning. And Rebecca is out on vacation, so we're going to be having these conversations without them, or at least without Rebecca this week. DJ Exclusive will be back tomorrow. That said, we have a lot lined up in in today's episode. I'm particularly interested in, Brother Mack, the conversation we're going to be having with some of the family from Florida as it pertains to Juneteenth and as it pertains to the official date. And I love the conversation that we've been having on and offline about the official history, how liberation and emancipation came for every state. It's almost like your own individual birthday. Speak to that, the individual nature of liberation and emancipation as it went state by state.
I mean, the easiest way to put it is this: it is without question, based on the historical documents and what the southern states that seceded from the Union stated, and that is that their secession was based on their ability to protect their peculiar institutions, African slavery, as they described it. So that was the basis of their secession, which means that this is the basis of the Civil War. So as that war is being fought, you got to remember that from April 12th, 1861 to April 9th, 1865, every day that war was fought, our ancestors were escaping slavery. So every day of that war potentially could be a day of emancipation. But now there are key days that stick out to a lot of us. Obviously Juneteenth, and so people have said, historically inaccurate, that Juneteenth is the oldest emancipation day in the history of America. Well, if you come to DC, April 16th is Emancipation Day in DC. And that event started because on April 16th, 1862, Lincoln and the Congress paid reparations to white slave owners to free our enslaved ancestors. So April 16th has come to be known as Emancipation Day here in the district. And then what we'll be talking about a little bit later today, May 20th, 1865, basically the same thing that from an accuracy standpoint of what happened in Galveston, Texas. Granger comes upon Galveston, finds enslaved folks, issues General Order Number 3 in accordance to the proclamation, thereby declaring our ancestors free. That same event played out in Tallahassee, Florida, with a general by the name of McCook, who did the exact same thing, read a proclamation in accordance to the Emancipation Proclamation, thereby establishing Emancipation Day in Florida. And so literally every day that our ancestors escaped, if you and I, the three of us, were enslaved and we escaped or found our freedom 3 different days, as we pass this story down to our family and our generation, that day is our Emancipation Day.
Yeah.
So to that point, that's the easiest way to put it.
I would absolutely want to know the day my ancestor got free. That would be now. I know it's probably impossible. And good morning to everyone who's joining us across all the different platforms. If you're listening via the podcast, you too can hit the share, like, and subscribe button. For those of you watching video, I am traveling, and I don't have anything but a microphone with me, so this is why you don't see me. But the conversation still remains, and it is just the importance of our history. Georgia, we were just talking about it in the On the Clock segment, and I think one of the reasons they fear critical race theory so much is because it's the people who have the power to tell the narrative control the narrative, literally.
That's right. And I was thinking too, as Brother Mack was talking, I used to live in Columbus, Georgia, and they have a Black historian there who has preserved a lot of artifacts. And one of them being a declaration that was made, I believe, in the newspaper, pointing to their emancipation, which was in January, I believe, of 1865. So how are you in thinking of, broader society and legislatures going to streamline, in some ways it feels like gentrify Juneteenth and say this is going to be the day, and think about how we have seen a lot of holidays become a tool for capitalism, and so I feel like this was a step in the direction of being able to profit on this day by streamlining it, by ignoring the fact that this was not something that happened on one specific day, and not acknowledging the history of this, being something that kind of unfolded day by day throughout the course of a year or two.
It's funny. Brother Mack, I'm going to pass it to you because this is literally right up your alley, and I want you guys to just have that conversation because you're speaking to some of the core issues right there, Georgia. It is the fact that they streamlined it, and now they have it nice in a package that they could put on a weekend sale for Old Navy. Go ahead, Dr. Mack.
Well, Georgia, I think, and Brother Dixon, that's certainly one way to do it, but literally, if you go back and just take a look at, just go a lot deeper with it. Most of us will admit that when we went through our educational experience from K through college, how many of us sat down and had true academic scholarship about the African-American experience in this country? I certainly didn't. I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, and I'm telling you, when I graduated from Mississippi State, I couldn't tell you 100 words about the Black experience. And that, I believe, was the case of most of us. And so when you have the majority of our people who do not know our experience, but at the same time, we also know that there was a history of us as a people, and we know that they kept that out through a policy of omission. So now when somebody comes with this beautiful mythological story of these were the last blacks enslaved and they kept it from them for 2.5 years, and they paint that picture, it is so easy to swallow that story. And now you make the sexiness of it, of what we do with language and culture. Juneteenth. When you put all of those pieces together, but the biggest piece of it was the fact that we did not do the scholarship. One of the things with these, so it made Juneteenth so easy to perpetuate. And now, just like you talked about the Chauvin, the hearing a sentencing of Chauvin, now you go back to May 25th of last year. Pandemic hits. All of us are captivated. We're watching this videotape of a murder of George Floyd. Now, every cry that we've ever given to white America about police brutality now comes rushing into them. It just rushes into them. And this feeling of guilt is all over these white folks. They want to do something. And we're mad as hell. So now we're screaming, make Juneteenth a holiday. We reach and grab it. Okay, we'll do it. But I've listened to, and fortunately, this group that's coming up in this segment, I don't know that I've ever felt the passion and the trueness of why we should remember. And when you hear from Commissioner Cox, you hear from Commissioner Proctor and Sister Barnes, and there was a brother in their group by the name of Clifton Lewis, and he's a beautiful, beautiful historian. And Ben, I would tell you, the historical layout that you've heard me do, they sent me a videotape of a radio show that he was on a year ago. And I call him Elder Lewis. Literally, I sat there yesterday and I watched it for the first time. And I almost cried at just hearing my elder tell the exact same story that I told to you all. And I'm thinking I'm a man on an island telling this story. I'm watching Elder Lewis tell the exact same story with the exact critical thinking. So as we talk about the fact that they want to get rid of critical race thinking, this is part of why they want to do it, because I am convinced that when those set of historical facts are sitting there, it helps you to see the world a lot clearer. And
yes, sir.
Those people out there who think, okay, guys, get off the Juneteenth thing. Okay, I respect that. I understand, because that's what they expect us to do. They expect us to start a fight, but don't finish it. But then I'm going to ask you this, family. I want to ask you this. The reason why this fight is so important, number one, is because it forces us to honor and pay respect to our history. But the other thing it does, family, is this is an absolute embarrassment to us as a Black folk, that we would allow a date to become a federal holiday when there was almost 250,000 of our ancestors still enslaved. And we know what the date was that ended chattel slavery. That's one point. Now, the other point is this: so many of you, no, I want voter suppression, I want reparations. Great, I want them too. But if you can't win this simple battle based on the knowledge of your history, how the hell do you expect to win the battle for reparation? Have you lost your mind?
I don't mean to laugh, Doc. It's the truth. It is. It's the truth, because
you can't even look right there. There are 27 amendments to the Constitution, family. The 13th Amendment is what ended chattel slavery on December 6th. You can't even get the country to recognize the end of its original sin, which is right there in front of God and everybody. And now you think without scholarship, you can win reparations? That's why you have to get inside this history and understand, because I promise you this, the argument for reparations, a very objective argument, not subjective, it lies within our history. And when that conversation starts, I'm going to be very excited for the three of us to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that conversation coming up at the top of the hour. We are here, like it or not, we are with Georgia Fort, independent journalist Georgia Fort, and Dr. Carl Mack. We are discussing both Juneteenth as well as critical race theory, but really it's history. It's just history. And one of the things this country is so terrified of is the history being told by the people who were on the receiving end.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the history books have been written by the victors. It's been written by white supremacy. Let's just call a spade a spade. And this is why they don't want critical race theory, because if we actually look at the history from an objective perspective, and here's the thing about objectivity, you cannot have the history told just by the people in power and claim that it's objective. You can't. It's impossible. For history to be objective, you got to have both lenses. You have to have the oppressed as well as the oppressor's interpretation, and then what's in the balance. You'll find, but it is certainly not the history that is taught to our children in these schools. And my wife and I were talking about this yesterday and all weekend. One of the number one things we got to stop doing is allowing this system of white supremacy to be the source of the only source of education for our children.
Well,
Georgia and then Professor Mack.
Let me say this.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Professor Mack, then Georgia.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sister. I'm gonna turn that over to you. I'm gonna be quiet. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh, no, and I want to hear yours. I'll just say quick. I'm curious. When you look at the December 6th date, is there anywhere in our nation that's actually recognizing that?
Yeah, the Constitution of the United States.
I mean, in terms of like states that or cities, is there any celebrations that are surrounding December 6th the same way Juneteenth is acknowledged?
The only one I know is with the guests who are coming up now. Okay. Because again, I promise you, to sit and listen and to dialogue with Elder Clifton Lewis, I have chills over my body, and part of it because I sat at the foot of Dr. Edward Jones, who is no longer with us, historian from the University of Washington. As a grown man, I used to just go to his house, go to his basement, and the challenges and the critical thinking that he would put through me and give me books. I'd ask him all kind of questions. He just reached behind me, give me a book, and I go read it. And I come back and we just have discussions. And it just, one thing led me to another. And so to be able to sit and dialogue with Elder Lewis, we all come with the same thing. Now you have historians like John Hope Franklin, who put so much emphasis on January 1st, 1863, because that was the Emancipation Proclamation. I agree with that, except when the Emancipation Proclamation was written and issued, and it was first issued September 22nd, 1862, and it went into effect January 1st, 1863. But at the time that it went into effect, what if we had lost the Civil War? It would have been useless. But more importantly, there were still Black folks enslaved. Our ancestors were still enslaved, and it took military action to do it. The Civil War is over. We still got Black folks enslaved in Delaware and Kentucky. And what finally ended it all? And I say December 6th because, again, I keep telling the story of Tubman. Sister Tubman was free. They kept asking her, baby, why are you going back? She said, I'm not free if my folks ain't free. Okay. On December 6th, chattel slavery in the United States is illegal. That's the day. That's the day it should happen. But let me go back to the whole critical race theory. And so Brother Dixon, you talked about history was always taught one-sided. And so one of the things, and again, this is the beautiful aspect of history, it just helps you to see the world differently. Now, I'm not really entrenched in the critical race theory. I just know it from the surface, like probably most of us.
Yeah.
Here is what history has said to me. These white folks are now bashing critical race theory. But you know what they've never said anything about? They've never said anything about the way that history has been taught. Now, that's just a blanket statement to us.
Yeah.
Through the policy of omission. But no, this is what I want, Sister Ford. I want you and I want Brother Dixon. I want you to look this up. I want you to look up the lost cause. It's an ideology, just like the critical race theory. But the ideology of the lost cause said this, and this is what they instituted into the textbooks that all of us learn. The South wasn't to be blamed for starting the Civil War. The Civil War was an honorable and noble act that the South had to do to curtail Northern aggression. Slave owners were kind. The enslaved, they were happy to be enslaved. These are all of the ideologies behind the lost cause. So when you go and research the theory behind the lost cause, trust and believe. This was the ideology that was permeated throughout history textbooks. There were veteran history committees who now said, it is our goal to make sure that our ancestors within the Confederacy are honored and remembered. By them daughters of the Confederacy, they started raising money. They started putting these statues up everywhere. They started putting together Confederate veteran history committees to make sure that textbooks did some of the following. White men would get credit for most, if not all, of the contributions in development of America. African-American women and other minorities are to receive little, if no credit. And then third, the South shall not be blamed for starting the Civil War. So when they looked at a textbooks, if your textbook didn't follow that format, they would kick it out. And there were two states that are primarily the leads of where history textbooks throughout the rest of the nation come from. And those two states are California and Texas. And so trust and believe, if your textbooks did not follow that format, they got kicked out. And if you go back and probably take a textbooks that your child is looking at right now and just arbitrarily flip open the page, I guarantee you, not that I think, and I don't lay down many guarantees, but I guarantee you, the overwhelming, if you do it 10 times, at least 8 of those pages, it's going to be a white man on that page. I guarantee. Just do it.
Absolutely.
Just do it. But again, that happened with the ideology of the lost cause. So for forever and a day, we've been exposed and shoved down our throats, and now being shoved down our children's throat, this ideology of the lost cause and telling history. Now, here's this critical theory. Nobody wants to do it. So take a look.
Go ahead, George. You were about to George jump in there because
it brings me back to AP American history. I was a freshman in high school. And this was, I was a straight A student in high school. I graduated top 20% of my class. And I had this one teacher in middle school who would give me books that were not a part of curriculum to just take home and read. And one of them was about the triangular trade and colonialism. And so I was very aware of African American history outside of what they teach you in public school. So when I went into AP American history, I already had this context. And I remember this is one of the only times in high school I actually got in trouble. I got kicked out. I actually got kicked out of history class. Well, because so it got to the part about slavery in American history. And I remember like it was yesterday reading a paragraph where it said that slaves were not really beaten because they were too valuable pieces of property.
Right.
What?
And I lost it. I got kicked out of class. You would have just thought, and the sad thing was, as a ninth grade biracial student going against this elderly white man about what's in the book. Come on now. This was a 60 or 70-year-old white man. He had read the stuff I had read, but he used this as an opportunity to gaslight me in front of the entire class. Like I didn't know what I was talking about. And I was like, I can bring you other books that contradict that.
But Georgia,
and so
go ahead.
Go ahead.
But Georgia, I need you to absolutely, again, obviously you'll never forget that story. But now when you study what the ideology of the lost cause is, you're the first person I ever met who has been victimized. I mean, just absolutely, in your case, gaslighted, because that ideology of the lost cause is exactly what they were trying to teach. And now for you're the first person that I've heard that had this awareness to say, wait a minute, that's not what happened. And now you face the consequences. So I'm saying to you, just look it up, just Google the ideology of the lost cause, and just, probably have to read like a couple of paragraphs of it. And I promise you, you'll harken back to your experience and go, that's exactly why that happened to me. Thank you so much for it. I love that story. I mean, I'm sorry it happened.
Did you get suspended, Georgia?
No, I think I got ISS in school suspension for talking back, and being crazy. But for me, I think it gives you an awareness at a young age that curriculum is designed as a part of a bigger system, a bigger construct, And so when we are literally brainwashing our kids and teaching them that Christopher Columbus discovered America, and we're okay with that, but we're not okay with critical race theory. I think that we have a larger issue at hand because curriculum is powerful. And if the standard across America for public schools is to teach kids information that's largely false, why, I mean, there's so many layers. And there's a reason why that is the default curriculum for public schools. There's a reason.
It's a couple of things that bother me. Number one is we must understand as a people that it is, how are public schools funded? They're funded with our tax dollars. So in a sense, we're saying, here, we're going to give you our money to support public schools. And then they turn around and say, well, thank you, but you will have no say-so in the history that we teach. And we're going to teach all the great things that we as white folks did. And we say, okay. So on that side, it's ludicrous to me. It's insane. But then on a simple side, the most shining example of the power of history. And we have some absolutely beautiful, incredible young intellectual talent coming up. And we have to unlock that talent. And all I can tell you is the example would be Malcolm, right? If we go back and just think about the history of Malcolm, he's in school, he wants to be a lawyer, teacher tells him no Ian's gonna be a lawyer, and they just break this child down mentally. And then based on what happens to his family, as he becomes a teenager and a young adult, he gets inside that street life and just lives about that life. So he goes to prison. And what happens when he's in prison? He gets this awakening of learning the Black experience, who he is as a Black man in America. And it was at that point that this real, true, immense power from this beautiful Black man became this beacon for us all. And
come on, man,
that level of being unlocked lies dormant in our history. And if we gave our children that, you can only imagine.
Yes, sir.
Where the progress that we would make as a people.
Absolutely. Let's do this. I want to play this clip real quick from the 700 Club's Pat Robertson, and he's discussing critical race theory. And I want to have a brief chat about that. And then we're going to be joined. Professor Mack, do me a favor and connect with our producer, David, in the chat room. We want to make sure we got that ball rolling. But this is how much they fear critical race theory. And you know what? If people like this fear it that much, maybe that's all the more reason we need to double and triple down on it. Let's take a look at it.
That the people of color have been oppressed by the white people. And the white people begin to be racist by the time they're 2 or 3 months old. And therefore, the people of color have to rise up and overtake their oppressors, and then, having gotten the whip handle, if I can use that term, then to instruct their white neighbors how to behave. Now that's critical race theory.
Well, so actually it's not, but it does not sound that bad when you consider you all let 600,000 people die from COVID-19 because of your ignorance. When you consider the number of black people who are killed by police disproportionately, so when you consider the barbarism of Western civilization, you think about Christopher Columbus. You guys celebrate Christopher Columbus, and the Native Americans had to survive him. Right. When you really do the sum total of what your culture has done, then perhaps that should be the interpretation of critical race theory, but it's not.
No,
it's not.
But Brother Dixon, let me tell you, this is, you brought me on to bring this historical perspective. And I've never seen this brother talking about what he thinks is critical race theory. I don't know how old that footage is, but the reason I'm laughing is because what he's telling you is what white folks have thought from the day that they enslaved our people. He just told you exactly. I can pull a passage from Thomas Jefferson saying exactly what he said. The exact thing. Jefferson said, I tremble when I think of my God, and God is a just God. And this will not go on forever. He says, I can view a day when the wheels of fortune would reverse. He said the exact same thing. George Washington. Blacks fought in the American Revolution, and so the Congress decided, no, we're going to kick them all out, because they were afraid that based on the oppression that they was giving us, now you want to arm us and say fight for us, that we would do it. And then Lord Dunmore of Virginia said to blacks in his Dunmore Proclamation, any blacks that fight for us, we'll grant you your freedom. Shit, man, we went over there like 20,000 strong in a hurry, quick and in a hurry. And then the Continental Congress changed it. Even Abraham Lincoln and this Congress, remember now, when the Civil War started, they forbade blacks to take up arms and to fight for our own freedom. It was pressure from Thomas, Frederick Douglass, Charles Sumter, Thaddeus Stevens, and those radical Republicans that just kept putting pressure on Lincoln, that even in the Emancipation Proclamation, that's when he opened it up for us to fight. So this fear of this revolution and this revenge factor that we may take has permeated through America from day one. And I'm telling you now that those who are against the critical race theory, they have that same level of fear. It's just
Georgia, real quick on, I want to ask in context of the Derek Chauvin sentencing that we just came across, and you were one of two journalists in the nation to be in that verdict, not the verdict rather, but the sentencing. I'm curious in terms of the erasure and the whitewashing of history, because that defense attorney would really like to paint the picture of what happened to George Floyd. He would like to whitewash Derek Chauvin and the bloody murder of the brutal murder of George Floyd with the same whitewashing brush as America has done Christopher Columbus and Western culture and civilization, and all the things that they celebrate. They really would like to rewrite the history for Derek Chauvin, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah, you saw that day in and day out of the trial. Every day, Attorney Nelson coming in and basically saying that there was no way George Floyd died from a knee on his neck, that it was due to drugs and it was due to the positive COVID test and all of these other absurd things. And he actually had different experts come in and help try to tell that story, even all the way up to sentencing, where we saw Derek Chauvin's mother come in and reaffirm that he's a good man and really just not even acknowledge what happened. So much so to a fault where, I don't know if you guys noticed when we played that clip, she said on November 25th. I don't know where that woman has been, but this incident did not happen on November 25th. The entire world, not just America, the entire world knows that George Floyd was killed on May 25th. So I think that you're absolutely right. And for me as a journalist, it goes back to the importance of narrative. and I keep trying to build a broader awareness about the power mainstream media has, because they're really the first line of defense to archive a lot of stories.
Right.
And so we give them a lot of power. We give mainstream media a lot of power to archive our stories, when a good case of this was the James Baldwin interview that ABC did in 1979, and they never actually aired it. So we give them our stories. They're following this trial. Who else independently, especially in our community, in the Black community, is archiving these stories, these facts, to have an independent account? Because if we leave it up to them, history will repeat itself, and they will do what they did, the same thing they did with slavery, the same thing that they did with lynchings, and George Floyd. We just had an attorney say this was a modern day lynching, and for a lot of the lynchings, they try to cover it up. They try to justify it. They make it more palatable, all of those things. So I think that you're right. And, in covering this case, there was a piece of information that I actually wanted to run by Dr. Mack. We here in Minneapolis, I'm headquartered in Minneapolis right now, and since George Floyd was killed on May 25th, 2020, the intersection where he was murdered has been shut down. And there were a group of organizers who came together, created 24 demands, and they have preserved that space. They've put barricades up. Recently, June 3rd, I think, was the day the city came in, removed the barricades. The barricades were put back up. June 15th, they came back in. So there's been this tug of war more recently, but we're looking at now over 390 days that there has been this ongoing protest in that space. And so it brought me to this question of what is the longest protest in American history? And I don't know if you know that off top, but the one a lot of people pointed to was the bus boycott, which I think was 381 days. And the question now being, is the protest at George Floyd Square, the intersection where he is killed, the longest protest in American history?
Well, again, based on how we define protest today, in this kind of knee-jerk reaction to an event, one could look at the Montgomery bus boycott, as you stated, for 381 days. One could look at this. Well, I would tell you what America doesn't want to recognize. And so if I think about it in a critical way, I would say this: the day that they started enslaving Black folks, that protest from that day. And even when you look in the vice president of the Confederacy was a man named Alexander Stephens. He wrote this speech called the Cornerstone Speech. And he starts off by saying the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution, the agitating questions. I promise you, this agitation about us being free started from the day we were enslaved in this country. So if you look at, and again, most people want to think we sat on the sideline and didn't do anything. Like, for instance, Joe Brown, the former judge. I mean, the dude's an idiot. And I'm calling him an idiot because I'm not going to spare him. He literally said Juneteenth is Black folks taking an L. I took his gavel and told him he's turned this into a kangaroo court, and I took his black card. So because again, he's obviously not aware or want to recognize our history. So this protest has been going for a while. But to your point, I do recognize, the question that you're putting in. And, outside of the Montgomery bus boycott and that length of time, I would say this, but what is clear is that the George Floyd protest is by far the largest protest in the history of this country. This protest involved well over 25 million people.
Wow.
There is not a protest that I know of in this nation that even came close to that. I literally thought Rodney King was, at the time, I thought Rodney King was the largest protest, if you will. And even before that, you go to the 1963 March on Washington. When we marched on Washington, there was somewhere between 200, if you put a large spectrum to it, 250, 300,000 people that came to that protest. 25 million, in every state in the union, all over the world, nothing even close to the reaction that the murder of George Floyd caused from a protest standpoint in this country.
We're discussing critical race theory and the Derek Chauvin sentencing that just took place over the weekend, but we're also talking about Juneteenth and the history, the accurate history, and the necessity for history to be told accurately and archived. Georgia, I appreciate the way you framed it, because that's what's happening with the media. They are the official archivers, and if they are archiving it through their lens, then our future is doomed to be the interpretation of people who don't look like us and don't have the same fights and struggles as us. And that includes a conversation on Juneteenth. Joining us now is Tallahassee City Commissioner Dianne Williams-Cox, along with Leon County Commissioner. We are here discussing Commissioner Proctor. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I want to thank Dr. Mack for facilitating this conversation, because it has everything to do with the accurate history of our people. I want to pitch it to Dr. Mack so you can frame the conversation. But thank you both for joining us this morning.
Now, listen, thank you so much, Brother Dixon. And the truth be told, Brother Dixon, it was your acknowledgement, when you first heard the truth, that literally was the first domino to fall to bring us to where we are. And I've spoken far more than enough. I call her Madam Commissioner, Commissioner Cox. She is my leader in this effort. And I just want to turn this over to her, because when she reached out to me and shared with me the history of what has happened in Florida, I was so moved. And so now, look, Madam Commissioner, the floor is yours. Please tell us.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mr. Dixon and your staff for bringing us on. And thank you, I call him Bruh Mack. Thank you, Bruh Mack, for giving us this platform. And I want to thank my counterpart, my colleague, my leader, Leon County Commissioner Bill Proctor. And you will learn that we're all rattlers. Understand that there's some rattlers around here. So he's also a bison. Commissioner Proctor is also a bison. But together, we are working on a common cause. We here in the state of Florida recognize May 20th as our Emancipation Day, because that's the date that General McCook came into Tallahassee with the help of colored troops to read the proclamation to free my people. And that happened in Tallahassee on May 20th, 1865, on the steps of the Knott Building here in Tallahassee. And we have celebrated that date since 1865. My folks left those baskets, they left that cotton, they left the field, and they came out and they celebrated. And we have celebrated that date in the state of Florida since that time. Now, what has happened is that we have somehow not documented it, and somehow some folks have forgotten it. But here in North Florida, what we're trying to do is make sure that our history is documented correctly. We're not here to fight Juneteenth, celebrate Juneteenth. Congratulations to my dear Sarah, Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee, for getting this to happen for the state of Texas. And we respect that. But in Florida, we got the word a whole month before by a whole different general that we were free, and we've been free ever since that time. And then this year, my colleague on the county commission, I call him the good doctor, Commissioner Bill Proctor, led the effort for county employees to have a paid holiday on May 20th. And then I came right across the street and led the effort for the city employees to do the same. So for the first time since 1865, in the city of Tallahassee, in the county of Leon, home to Florida A&M University and Florida State University, city and county employees had the day off to recognize what had happened here.
Now, City Commissioner Dianne Williams-Cox, thank you so much for joining us this morning. But I am a wildcat.
I understand. I have been speaking to people about you, and one of my friends told me to tell you that to say 1.0, and you would know what that meant.
No, wait a minute. Are you okay? Yeah, no, you really do know my people. Then no, I absolutely know Ooh, you
I
you
did a
hit
little
close to
homework.
home.
I did a little homework. They teach us how to research at Florida A&M. See, I don't know what they do.
Wait a minute. You know a little too much about me now. You opening up different cities, different, but I know that person must also be an AKA because my wife is also an AKA. So, and she also graduated from Florida A&M University. So
You married up. You married up. You did good. You did good.
but, Commissioner Bill Proctor, thank you so much for joining us. I hate to have inserted myself, but she couldn't keep mentioning FAMU and I not get it on the record. Talk to us a little bit about this broader conversation about Emancipation Day for Florida, and one thing I love that everyone is saying is that we're not challenging Juneteenth. We're not challenging it in the sense of we don't feel it should be celebrated. We're broadening and expanding the conversation, because as Bro Mack, I think we might have to start calling him that. As Brother Mack said, every day one of our ancestors got free was their own Independence Day, their own Emancipation Day.
Well, first of all, thank you all for letting me on this. I didn't know, is nephew Tommy coming on this morning? Y'all started playing the dozens and going behind people's, going behind their walls and coming up with 1.0 and
the inside secrets and all.
I mean, look, y'all this, so I didn't know how much y'all was gonna put mine out there. That how much you had to put yours out there. But this is very, very interesting. And those old Wildcats, we got something for y'all. I need to go ahead and tell y'all were good in the MEAC, but we're in the SWAC now, and the SWAC is under new management, and that's Florida A&M Rattlers. So it's one.
You do know we are in the SWAC as well, though. We
but yeah. You were under the old dispensation of the MEAC, and something funny was going on in there. I don't know what kind of water they were passing out, but we're drinking wholesome bottled water. SWAC is clear. We got some new things.
You know what, Commissioner? For the sake of the liberation of Black people, I'm gonna yield the floor. You win.
Yes, sir. Well, I want to thank you all. I think that our great City Commissioner Dianne Williams-Cox has clearly articulated the factual reality that here in Florida, our masters simply told us what time it was, and if they said it was 12 o'clock a.m. when it was 12 o'clock p.m., we just said Yaza. Here we have again, interesting enough, that our slave owners are defining for us, giving meaning to, and have set and legally determined the date that they will recognize as history's turn to say you are free. And again, we find that the descendants of slaves themselves have no voice in the legal determination or recognition of the date of which we thought or felt, have been told, have celebrated over the years. So the powerlessness of Africans in 1865 and the powerlessness of Africans in 2021 in America, the equivalent of our having not the voice to determine, is a stark reality. I begin there. The capacity to foster a parallel history, if you will, is something that we've always had to do. And that's the duality of, quote, the American story and the duality of the African story in America. Those are different norms. Those are different narratives. And clearly, again, I'm thankful for the recognition and the legalization and admission that slavery occurred. So this holiday captures and sets, I believe, a new down payment on a conversation for reparations, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the specificity of those dates, our leader and commissioner, Williams-Cox, has articulated it well. We know that history. We are aware of it. And we will possibly continue to make sure that the accuracy of it is portrayed.
Yeah.
So we're standing our ground on that accuracy. But with respect to the new holiday that's come about, we will also embrace it. In fact, we should have about a month off for former slaves. I mean,
absolutely,
2 days, we need 2, 3, 4.
But
I mean, I might throw my birthday in there for one. I mean, that ought to work.
But Commissioner, I want to get to the heart of what's happening here. Number one, I want to ask you, what is it that made you, as a commissioner in Leon County, say we're going to push May 20th as a county holiday for employees to recognize the end of America's original sin in the state of Florida? What is it that made you push that?
It obviously was George Floyd. After the George Floyd piece, which you very eloquently have addressed moments earlier, it was just frustration, and it was just a recognition that the wrongfulness of it. But the Floyd incident really just charcoal broiled my soul. And I was at the height of passivity itself. And that was the catalyst for me. And I'm a little embarrassed, but I'll say it publicly. I had not thought that earnestly about Leon County. And at the point of 1865, our county was, I believe Commissioner Cox was around 65, 70% Black. The population of the county during slavery, 40s, 50s, 60s, we were dominant. So considering all that African Americans have given to this county over the years, it just seemed that it was high time. And I think that there was a susceptibleness in the white culture at the moment that they were more open to receive and to go forward with this date, recognizing a whole lot of contributions had been made, which previously were not respected.
Oh, okay, and so Commissioner, both you and Sister Cox, I'm assuming that the same thing happened in the city of Tallahassee, that you helped lead efforts for city employees to recognize May 20th. Is that correct?
Absolutely. What we try to do, we're one city in this county. We're the capital city of the state of Florida, and we have one city in the county. And so wherever possible, we try to collaborate and coalesce to make sure that we have unity. We couldn't have one part of our community celebrating and the other part not celebrating. Now, to bring it full circle, it would be great if the state of Florida would join us, so that, because we're in the capital city, so we have a lot of state employees here. But to our chagrin, when we went forward to try to make this happen for the state, we found some legislators who were not either learned or willing or educated on what had happened here in Tallahassee. So some of the local historians, Ms. Althemise Barnes and Mary May, and some other historians here in our city, worked to try to educate our legislators. We met with them. We met with the Legislative Black Caucus and talked to the filers of the bills, the leaders of that. And we didn't make a lot of headway with them, and they look like us.
Okay, so
different parts of the state. And so in the end, it did not pass, but they have vowed to file again to make Juneteenth a state paid holiday. They vowed to file for this in the next legislative session. And so what we're doing is we've embarked upon the planning of a statewide conference to teach Florida our Emancipation Day history. And so that's how I found you. I found you're on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And when I heard what you were saying, I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. You got somebody outside of Florida speaking the same language. And so I immediately reached out to you, and that's what led us here. And so we have folks who are watching this show, I'm sure today. As they say, we got people who probably never watched it before, but this is what we got to do. We've got to educate on every platform. And I heard you say this earlier, sister. The media is the archive of our stories, but if they ain't telling it right, we got to get the people who gonna tell it right, because the truth has to be told. And I believe right now is the time that the Lord is throwing back the covers and revealing it all, because even some other folks have gotten, as Commissioner Proctor said, he was at the highest level of pistivity. I think other people have gotten a little pissed off. The Tulsa Wall Street story, added fire to the flame. So there are the George Floyd bill that they're sputtering and stuttering over, the John Lewis bill, the suppressing the vote. Here in Florida, we're one of those states. It's like we're back in the Confederate or something.
Come on now.
We're one of those states that are suppressing the vote, and we're here because we're smart. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna get grandmama and them to the polls now.
There you go.
Y'all can do what you want, but we're gonna get them to the polls. If they can't go on Sunday, we're gonna take them on Saturday. How about that?
That's it. That's it.
So
Let me jump in there.
You can't suppress us anymore.
You know how we say it around here? We have started saying it like this. We tired of overcoming, but we will. We tired of overcoming, but we will. And Professor Mack, I want to frame up the conversation a little bit more, because I know we want to dovetail some of the other sides of this conversation in here. I like the way I appreciate the way this conversation is being framed in general, but even specifically to how you framed it, Brother Mack, in terms of if we can't get the simple history of when we as Black people were freed.
Right.
And because of the nature of slavery, it's on an individual level, it's an individual date. And I would love, if there was a project for me to find out when my ancestor was free, I would pay to find that out, because that means something. But if we can't get as on a state level and on the federal level for them to get it right, then how the heck are we going to get reparations, Professor Mack?
Well, Brother Dixon, let me say this. And Commissioner Proctor, you said something that harkened me back to a conversation that I had with a sister whose family right now is in Florida, and that's Dr. Lydia Patton, and she's just my soul of inspiration. And Dr. Patton said, you know, Carl, our ancestors were voiceless. And today we have to be their voice. And so you spoke of that, Brother Proctor, but now this is the part of the conversation, family, where we have to go behind the woodshed. Because see, you know, commissioners, both of you all have painted the accuracy of what's going on in Florida. But now I want to get more direct, because see, I didn't want this to be a one-sided conversation. So I went digging, and Sister Ford, I ain't no investigative journalist, but I went digging. And so I found the names of two Black legislators, Tavares McCurry. Am I saying that his first name right? But he's in the House, the Florida State House. And then there's a Randolph Bracey who's in the Florida Senate. Now, they in our skin, but they ain't acting like our kin. And I'm saying this because see, Sister Barnes and this committee, Commissioner Cox, it's my understanding that they went and sat down with these Black Florida state legislators. They sat down with them and they gave them the right history. Now, I'm going to say this. I told you earlier, I listened to Elder Lewis. I've listened to Sister Barnes. I've listened to Sister Cox. I've watched them. I've looked at their footage. They got the story right. So what befuddles me, and what I want to hear from you, McCurdy and Bracey, what I want to hear from you, what all of us want to hear from you, how is it that Black Floridians are telling you that May 20th, Juneteenth ain't got nothing to do with what happened in Florida, and you are pushing an agenda with knowledge that what the Black folks, the Black soldiers who are buried in cemeteries in the state of Florida, we don't care what they did. We gonna just go along with what's wrong and what's popular. Now I'm gonna say this to you like I've said it before, McCurdy and Bracey. There is a fundamental difference between ignorance and stupid. Ignorance is when you lack the knowledge. Now, because Sister Barnes, Elder Lewis, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Cox have all educated you and told you, and you still want to hold a press conference and shove this lie of Juneteenth, keeping the Black folks and our ancestors in Florida who are buried in that state, in the Sunshine State, to keep them voiceless. You are the quintessential definition of stupid. Now, we've asked you to come on this show and explain it to us, and that invitation still exists.
I tell you what, though, if they, I'm sure they're gonna show up now. So we're gonna make some room. We're gonna make room for them to come on. They more than happy they can come on tomorrow, or they can come on later on in this episode if somebody has a way to tweet at them. But it's important though, because here's what I'm seeing, Dr. Mack and Commissioner Cox and Commissioner Proctor. What and in Georgia also, because we've had this conversation. You and I have had this conversation offline. It seems as though there will always be someone there happy to facilitate this inaccurate history. I want to be very specific because I don't want to lay anything at these people's feet that is not to be laid at their feet. But we have this inaccurate history that's being spread throughout the country, and it's dealing with our fundamental truth as Black people. And the question is why? Help me to understand why they are messing the history up.
Right. But it's not only messing it up, but at the same time, disrespecting the ultimate sacrifice paid by Black Floridians to get Black Floridians free. It is an abomination. And for those of you who look at me and go, Carl, you're coming too hard. No, I'm not coming nearly hard enough.
I don't want to see
inside this history. When you get inside and sit with Sister Cox, Commissioner Cox, and Commissioner Proctor, and I was on the phone with Sister Barnes. Sister Barnes got to be what, Sister Cox? I don't want to put her age way out there, but she's our elder. But this sister
she's seasoned. We'll say she's seasoned.
And she's beautifully seasoned.
And beautiful.
And she's you can hear the heart and soul of this sister trying to remember and pay homage to those who made that ultimate sacrifice for us in Florida. And what is McCurdy and Bracey doing? They just put a pair of tap shoes on them.
Well, let me.
We just gonna follow like everybody else and hold a press conference. And I promise you, Florida, we're gonna get Juneteenth.
Brother Matt, let me ask. I want to ask Sister Cox and Commissioner Cox and Commissioner Proctor. I want to ask you guys some questions here because I think it does get to some underlying issues where there is power, there are resources, we can get holidays, and there's money sometimes that drives a lot of the participation. And I'm not talking about these I don't know these brothers that Brother Matt called out, but we'll be more than happy to get to know them. I'm thinking more in terms of the narrative that is being funded by well-meaning white liberals who have, whatever, they have their white guilt, and then they're pouring in money to different, or I just kind of, I'm trying to put a finger as to why we would spread the wrong history as well as dishonor our ancestors. Commissioner Cox, what are your thoughts? Williams-Cox.
I really don't know the real reason for why they're doing this. What they've said to us is that other states are doing it. Well, if other states are jumping off a cliff, that don't mean we need to jump off a cliff. And my thought on that is, if you're going to recognize another state's history, recognize yours first. You can't do theirs and don't do your own. Right. And nowhere in our Florida statutes, the laws of our land, is there anything listed in our Florida statutes that someone can go and research that mentions May 20th as Florida's Emancipation Day? So let's go there first. Yeah. Let's fix our stuff first. Let's sweep around our front door first.
Come on. Or you try to sweep around mine.
Hey, you know the song. And then we can go and celebrate with others. And so what we're doing, we're trying to educate everybody that we can on our history. And we've had some cities around the state to adopt a resolution to recognize the May 20th. And so I don't know the real motive. I've not this year for the first time, for the second or third time, the past 2 or 3 years. There have been some local celebrations regarding Juneteenth. And again, I'm fine with your celebrations. Yeah. We just need to make sure that the history is correct. If we're having trouble with it, imagine what our children are going to have, the trouble they're going to have. And as we talk about the critical race theory, let's just get the critical history correct first. Let's get that right. So they can at least read and be able to understand. I'm a Floridian. And Commissioner Proctor is I don't know how many generation Proctor. The Proctors are very prominent, well-known family way back from that period of time. and builders and wealthy Black people from Tallahassee.
Wow.
To just whitewash and erase that history, it's just, as the children would say, it just ain't fair. And it just ain't right.
Commissioner Proctor.
Well, I'm so confused that what we're talking about, I don't even know what we're going to do with January 6th. And if we're not careful, January 6th will become the next national holiday.
Come on, somebody.
In which the lie, not only what we're talking about, emancipation, and imagine what the lie that is evolving and picking up speed right now. And if you and I are not careful, those folk on January 6th are going to be patriots of order and lift it up. So how do white people tell these lies and perpetrate their own narratives? But we are in present time watching them give legitimacy, authenticity to what was very much a terroristic act.
Come on.
But let them tell the story. It was patriotism in its highest moment since 1776.
Listen,
Frederick Douglass said the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Come on
That's
now.
the price. In understanding that as a beginning point, you get a lot of handkerchief-headed, weak-minded, spineless Uncle Toms and Aunt Mamas who take the path of least resistance because there is a resting place in going alone to get along. So they take that path of least resistance because they don't want to put up any kind of vigilance in the struggle for freedom. They're looking for the soft, for the easy, for the resting place, for the acceptance. Yes. And they will co-opt their own history, co-opt and sell out their own people for whatever it means for them to take that rest within their own chest to find peace. We're not going to find peace unless you are in that struggle, fighting with that truth. But today, not only are we looking at January 6th and say, what in the hell is evolving? Where are they going with January 6th? I'm telling y'all, in 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to be proposed as a day to celebrate.
Come on.
But where do we go from here now that we're working between Juneteenth and whatever other day in May 20th? What does it mean? Those 2 days. How do we define it? What meaning will we give to it? We ain't got no control on legalizing nothing then nor now. But the issue is we still have the right to put forth our own interpretation of our own struggle for freedom. So right now, I think when you talk about the post-traumatic stress disorder of slavery, or the post-slavery traumatic disorders, I believe that we have this down payment statement. We done it. We did it. We hold our hands up. Yeah, we got to bow down here. We done it. We done it. The mental health piece that flows from the tentacles of mental disorientation is so horrific upon our families, who we are, how we see ourselves. I think that first act of reparation has to be some way of coming to deal, and maybe Sister Ford has a better sense as a journalist to say, how do you right the wrong? No, how do you get me back to my right state of mind?
Come on.
I went over to Africa. I just wanted to meet the Proctors. Couldn't wait to see the Proctor. Ask everybody, where the Proctors at? Everybody said, who? So Malcolm said, I'm just X. I ain't no little. Clay said, I ain't no Clay. I'm Muhammad Ali. We got so far, so much to straighten out, y'all, beyond what date was it, the accurate date? Because I remember my grandmama actually said that she was 2 years younger than what her mama told her, and went to the Social Security and got it all changed. There's a lot of stuff going on. But the major point, gentlemen, ladies, is that where do we go from here? Chaos or community? That was Dr. King's last book. It still speaks to us. Now that we got these dates, we got down to 2. We narrowed down to 2, 1 or 2. Where do we go from here?
Yeah,
I believe that public education versus taking public dollars to support private schools. When you got private schools getting public dollars, but they got a different curriculum and are not held to the accountability of taking tests in the state of Florida or other states, but they're not held to passing no tests, but they're getting the public dollars, and public dollars going to public school systems are held accountable for what children learn or don't learn and how we define a learned child,
but Commissioner,
well-learned child.
Commissioner
I know I'm
Proctor,
all out of the weeds, but I'll
Commissioner
leave the floor
Proctor,
right there. Those are the questions. Where do we go from here now that slavery is over? We are still enslaved, and until we get the minds of our children within our care, I'm telling y'all, it don't make a difference on this calendar.
Literally had that conversation. Go ahead, Dr. Mack.
Yes, sir.
Let me say this. You know, part of us winning and getting all these things is learning how to win. So when you say it's narrowed down to 2, no, it needs to be 1. There is no compromise on the ultimate sacrifice of our ancestors in the state of Florida, what they paid. Narrowing it down to 2, no, it has to be 1. And so, you know, what I want to glean from you and Sister Cox, and I know, you know, because you all are in the state, you know, you may be a little bit more cautious, but given what you did, what both of you did at the city of Tallahassee and in Leon County to recognize May 20th, tell me, how does it resonate with you that you got 2 Black legislators in the Florida Assembly who are absolute gatekeepers against recognizing May 20th when you have told them and taught them that Juneteenth ain't today? What does that mean to you all?
That means that we've got to continue to be resilient. We've got to educate not only our own, but we've got to educate others as well. And if we have people who won't listen, then we have to get people who will listen.
Yeah.
And so we have to broaden our pool, coming on shows like this, doing the conference that we're planning to do, to educate those who want to be educated, because maybe they can't hear it from me. Maybe they can't hear it from Ms. Barnes, but maybe they can hear it from some of their peers in their age group. Maybe I'm too seasoned for them to get it as well. But while we're on that subject, let me mention this that has gone beyond any discussion about our Emancipation Day in Florida or Juneteenth or all the other states' Emancipation Day. The lie that's being perpetrated is that all slaves were freed on June 19th. Not true. Not true. All slaves were freed on December 6th, 1865, with the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. So if we want to narrow it down to one universal date, then that would be the date, December 6th, 1865.
So I got a question.
Even with that, we still don't want to whitewash each state's recognition of their own history.
Perfect.
Yeah. Commissioner Proctor, go ahead.
I got a finger up, and I promise it ain't my middle finger either.
And he ain't Baptist either, because you know we do that. We put that finger up. He's an AME preacher.
Preacher want to make sure it ain't the middle finger you got up.
You got the floor, Dr. Proctor.
Those things. Are we saying that December 6th is the date? We want to subtract and not have 2 days, but going down to December 1, we all shake hands and agree on that one. Is that what you're saying, Commissioner?
Okay. I think that we should celebrate them all, but we need to make sure that the history is correct. And Brother Mack has a calendar that has Black history 365 days. It's so bad that Google, and he played it for me, I heard it. Google, if you go to your Google Assistant and say, hey, Google, tell me what happened today in Black history, Google gonna come back and tell you what happened in Black history from his calendar. Now I'm gonna wait and get the version that has his voice, because you hear that voice. I'd rather hear that voice than hear Google talking about today in Black History. No, I want to hear the man talk about the man who put it there. What happened in Black History?
Tallahassee City Commissioner Dianne Williams-Cox and Leon County Commissioner Bill Proctor. Listen, we absolutely have to have you back to have more conversations like this. And Sister Williams-Cox, tell Sister Bailey I said hello. Tell her she knew exactly how to let me know. She know who we know. We all know the same people.
And if 1.0 didn't get by, she told me to mention 2.0.
And you know what? And a lot of love. Now, my DJ, we both marched in the pride of Bethune-Cookman. He's not here this morning. He's out sick, but he was in the chat room saying if he's got to roll over his bed of affliction and cut on his camera and let y'all know that this is a Wildcat house, he would do it. He wanted me to tell y'all good morning.
Well, good morning. And let me know. Let me tell you, my best friend, my bestie, marched in the Wildcat Band too.
Okay.
Back in the 80s, and I don't hold out against her. I love her.
Well, you'll like this. You'll like this. Our co-host Rebecca Azor, she's on vacation this week. She is a Rattler as well. So we are a house divided, but we are a house unified underneath the spirit of HBCUs and our blackness. Thank you all. And Dr. Mack, obviously you stay here, but thank you for setting up this conversation. I think it is a very, very important conversation.
Thank you all.
Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Cox, I'm so proud of you all. You just warmed my soul. And Sister Barnes and Elder Lewis, thank you so much. And I'm look forward to talking to you all and continuing this fight, because I promise you this, I ain't going nowhere. Commissioner Cox, you my captain. You tell me, you point me and I hunt.
And listen, and Sister Cox, you be sure now, be careful where you point, because you see he's a shooter. He is a shooter. He got an accurate aim and he don't miss. So, thank y'all so much.
Listen, I know he's a sharp shooter.
That's it. That's it. All right, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Cox, Williams-Cox, thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to unpack a lot more of what we discussed, more likely than not, after this.
Dancing slowly in the moonlight beneath the stars that lit up your eyes. The sweet scent of your skin filled up my lungs with ecstasy. We were so young, maybe 20-something. We were living in a fantasy. I knew right from the start you were the other half of my heart. Ooh, half of my heart. Oh, I could spend every single day staring into your beautiful blue. Every single day, every single hour. We're growing older together now, but I still feel young when I'm with you. We were so young, maybe 20-something. We were living in a fantasy. I knew right from the start you were the other half of my heart. Wanna be so the other half of my heart. Wanna be so yeah, yeah. Wanna be so you make me wanna be something more. We were so young, maybe 20-something. We were living in a half of my heart. Oh, you are the other half of my heart. Oh, yeah, the other half of my heart.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, non-gender conforming individuals. Welcome back to Like It or Not. We are still joined by Dr. Carl Mack. She called you Bruh Mack. I kind of like, but we'll discuss that off air. And then independent journalist Georgia Fort. They are sitting in with us today, and Rebecca Azor will be back after her vacation, and DJ Exclusive will be back tomorrow. Georgia, I want to come to you because, well, one, that I don't know what it is. Talking with just talking with our people does it for me. Like I'm in Florida. Reason nobody can see my picture right now. I'm traveling. I'm in Florida with my in-laws, and Brother Mack, you actually mentioned sitting in the basement and getting books and whatnot. And me and my father-in-law, we sit in the garage and we listening to some soul music, and we talk. And as we talked, Georgia, we talked about the power that the media has to frame how we see everything, how we interpret everything. And Georgia, when you said that they are the archivers, I think we really do miss the fact that it doesn't really matter. And I hate to say this, this is what I believe. I'm not stating this as a statement of fact, but this is my belief. I do not believe that it matters so much how we perceive events as they happen to us, as much as how it's recorded in history, and media is one of the number one forces in that area. Talk to that for me.
Yeah, I mean, even you think when you go back to get some historical context to an event, you'll pull up an old newspaper, right? And it's so damaging. Even we just saw this play out here in Minneapolis. There was another Black man after Dante Wright that was killed. His name is Winston Smith. He was killed by a federal task force. And we learned federal task forces actually don't have to wear body cameras, so there's no footage of it. And the first narrative that was published about him was that he was a murder suspect. And it reminded me of the false allegations that used to be printed in the paper to justify lynchings. And even pointing historically in the state of Minnesota in 1920, there was 3 Black men who were lynched. They were only in town for a circus. They were working for a circus. A white woman falsely accused them of rape, and they ended up being lynched. Now, when you look at the paper the next day, what you learn is that a doctor did an examination, a medical examination, and there was no sign of rape. And so, but that initial false allegation was so damaging, it incited a mob of white people who then busted into the jail, interrupted the criminal justice process, got those men out of their cells, and lynched them. And so we continuously see how media is a part of the system, because even looking with Winston Smith, a lot of people never heard about him because of that initial narrative. That initial narrative was so damaging that white America wrote it off as a justified killing. So media is a tool that is used, a vehicle that is used oftentimes to uphold white supremacy. And we, knowing how it played a role 100 years ago, need to be mindful of how it's playing a role right now, in the way that what's happening right now will be remembered 100 years from now.
That's it.
Because it's absolutely going to be the digital archives for the next generation that they're going to be looking at, the videos, the photos, the articles, all of that. They're going to be referencing that to try to get a frame of reference of what was happening in this historic era that we're living in right now.
So let me ask this question. You know, and I just found it fascinating when you talked about this clip from James Baldwin that was, you know, laying dormant in there. But then give me your thoughts on also organizations like Getty Images, who just, I mean, they go out there and they buy up everything. And, you know, so how does that play into this narrative of where we have to begin to archive our stories as well. And are there other examples similar to the James Baldwin situation that you know of right offhand?
Well, the thing with the James Baldwin situation that's hard is none of us knew about it until the producer who worked on the project released it. Because still to this day, ABC still has not released it. It wasn't released by ABC. It was released by the filmmaker who was so in awe of the opportunity of interviewing James Baldwin that he just went ahead and published it himself. You can see at the bottom, it says, love it. So we would never really know what's in ABC, NBC, CBS's archive until other people like Love It call it out and say, hey, I worked on this historical interview that just never saw the light of day. And we still have yet to hear from ABC as to why. ABC, they haven't made a statement saying, well, was it because of his sexuality? Was it because the fact that he was so transparent about his blackness? The pivotal moment in that interview for me that really stood out was when the reporter asked him, why did you go to Paris? And he said, I wanted to know what it was to be me versus what it is to be a Black man in America. My whole life experience has only been through the lens of the constraints of being Black in America. And so I wanted to leave this country and see where my identity starts and where being Black in America stops. And I just thought that was so profound. But there was some other little nuggets in that interview where you could see potentially a ABC executive saying, this is too radical, or this is too Black, or this is not palatable enough, right? And so many times. So it's hard to say how many, but that's what we should be asking ourselves is, if this is just one that we know of, how many more of our stories were not told because huge corporations thought that they weren't good enough, or they were too radical?
So let me ask this question. Because we know, or we don't know, but we know something's in those vaults. So in this climate today, what would happen if you, as our representative, went to ABC, NBC, CBS and said, let us look in the vaults and see what you have here. And as far as being able to tell our stories, some interesting stories from the Black perspective, what would they say to you? Or basically whatever they say, they're saying to us about keeping our history dormant.
So I think a few things. And I want to circle back on what you said about Getty Images, because I think that there's something there too that we have to tap into. But what concerns me about climbing up that tree is the closest I think we ever got to that was with Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby, before he was arrested, he was working out a deal with NBC. He was trying to buy a network, which ultimately means he would have access to the archives. And so, I don't know exactly, why the timing of that, all of those accusations happened like simultaneously while he was trying to work out that deal. But I think that's the closest that we've ever gotten to a Black person going to one of these networks and really being in a position and having the power to open up the archives. The unfortunate thing, though, is that they don't have to archive our history. It costs money to archive too. So there could be things that are just deleted because they're not going to invest in archiving our history. And if there's not a count of it, then how can you even really recollect it? Right. Yeah. So that in going forward, we have to be mindful in investing in, and every city has their Black paper, their Black radio station. Some have a Black TV station, not all, but we have to be very intentional about investing in Black owned media and sitting on the boards to help them put the infrastructure in place to archive, because archiving is expensive, but ultimately in 20, 30 years, the archives is going to be how we remember our history. And so with the Getty images, even taking it to the next level, the power of Getty image and the power of even the network itself is to be able to disseminate information across the country quickly, right? And having some formal partnership, a business partnership in place with other entities where you have some agreement to content share. And so this is how you will turn on ABC in Florida, and you could turn on ABC in Minnesota or ABC in Georgia and see a different person saying the exact same words with the exact same video and images, is because it's called a wire service. And that's what Getty is. Black people don't have a wire service, right? We have Oprah Winfrey Network. We have Tyler Perry Studios. Like, we're starting to get some elevation in terms of the advancement of Black-owned media, but we have yet to invest in an infrastructure that allows us to have a wire service where the Rolands and the Benjamins and the Georgias of the country can click of a button, upload something, and then now everybody has access to it. And so having that independence even would allow us to have further control of our narrative, because right now the way that a story goes national is either through a CNN or ABC or NBC, because they have the infrastructure, they have the wire service that's set up where they upload it and then it's distributed and it's available to all of their affiliates in the country. And so we have to start to invest in infrastructure like that.
But you know, this story with James Baldwin, just, I mean, it's got me going crazy to know that, because he is such a profound individual, as you know. But still, just play the supposition with me. Based on the James Baldwin example, could you imagine walking in, just play along with me and tell me what would happen if you walked in to ABC or any of the major networks and you gave the example of this hidden treasure that was lying dormant in your vaults, and we want to know what else is in your vaults? What would they say to you?
I'd venture to say they'd just say no, unless you got or write them a pretty big check. You know, Georgia, what do you think? Will you think the same, or you think?
I don't think that it's hidden for a reason. And I think I mean, when you start, we always talk about the patterns and connecting the dots, right? And how there's parallels. Why is it so hard to learn the truth about slavery and emancipation? Why isn't that taught in schools, right? Why is there this lack of transparency? Why are things hidden? Why are there things about Black people that are hidden from Black people? Why? You know, and so as long as they have the power and the control and the ownership, it's theirs. They don't, because they own it. And it points to a bigger, something I think is even more problematic about the media industry, is how exploitative it is. The world now, America has been made largely aware of how exploitative the music industry was in the 80s and the 90s. We know that, and there's been lawsuits and there's been ramifications to the contracts now that artists get. But that revolution has not happened in the media industry. When you examine the contracts that are given to photographers, videographers, reporters, anchors, they are very exploitative and discriminatory. But that has it's been allowed to continue because nobody's ever really called it out and asked for anything different. And so when you talk about this idea, which it doesn't feel very radical, like, hey, can I see what's in your vault, especially as it pertains to race and culture and Black history in America? But they don't have to. That we have no legal right to any of our stories, even if Baldwin, even if a descendant of James Baldwin himself went into ABC and asked for it, you have no legal right. It's their work, it's their content.
I know that part of it, but so you know, I am of the mindset that the most dangerous roadblock to progress in America is not the white supremacist, it's the white liberal, right? As you said, he was too Black. But then ABC, NBC, these media outlets, CNN, the moment you all in journalism who are on these shows get too black, then they get you too gone. So what I'm
Melissa
saying,
Harris Perry.
absolutely. So what I'm saying is, in the spirit of not saying we have a right to it, but just in the spirit of saying, because you want to be fair with us and you want to paint yourself good, would you mind if we looked in the vaults and maybe uncover some of these nuggets? So you're of the mindset that not if we go in there demanding it, but I mean, even if we ask to just uncover our story and help us to share it, they would just go, no.
I think we should ask.
I think it's worth an ask.
I think it's worth asking too. My concern is just on what legal grounds. Like there's no, it's just like, hey, and it's like it's asking for a favor almost. And while I think that, and you have people like Attorney James Walker, who was a critical force in winning the lawsuit against Sony, right? And so I would think, instead of just going and I don't want to say naively knocking on the door with no leverage, right? I would say lawyer up, figure out where the loopholes are, because we know even in copyright laws, after like 25 years or something, 25 years, I think that there starts to be some gray area in terms of ownership, right?
And so you mean public domain, the 25 years after the death of whoever created that content in the music industry, that it rolls over into public domain.
Right.
Something along those lines. Go ahead.
So start to investigate some of those things so that when you go in there, you're equipped with something, right? But I don't think in America that we are going to go knock on the door of any of these huge media corporations and say, hey, we want to see your archives, and they're going to say, okay. They're not, because that's their bread and butter. You got to think, the business of media is this content. Mm-hmm. The business of media, how do they make money? How are they employing people all across this country to do what they do? How? Because they are capturing stories, breaking stories. They have exclusive content, and that's their product. They're not just going to give away their product, but we don't look at it that way. We're not, especially people who consume media, we're not trained to think of the things that we read or the photos that we see or the videos that we share on Facebook. We're not trained to look at that as somebody's product, something that someone owns, but they do own our stories. And in acknowledging how damaging this could be and how much control and power they do have, we need to take that knowledge and start to build an infrastructure so that in 20 years, we don't have to go knock on nobody's door and ask for our stories again.
I do want to say this. I licensed my content to Google. I didn't sell it to them.
Here's another aspect of it. In Georgia, we have some of that video. I think you provided some of that video from James Baldwin, and I haven't had a chance to see any of it yet, but I know it's brilliant because I know it's James Baldwin, right? And I know that it bothers me because you're telling it exactly the way it is, that there no telling what is behind their vaults, behind these walls, these archives of how much, because these brothers and sisters, non-gender conforming individuals back then, where they were telling the truth. They had nothing to lose except for their chains, and they were speaking truth to power. And that there's information, but we can't get to it because we don't own the archives. We don't have access to them, nor do we own them. And it really speaks to how critical it's going to be for us to record the history of our present. Our people record our own history of the present. And I think that's partially, to some degree, that's what we're doing even here in independent media and the Benjamin Dixon Show and On the Clock with Georgia Floyd and your independent work. And Dr. Mack, you're literally recording history on Google servers. Let's play. Okay, so it was a patron who sent us this clip. Okay, so the patron sent us this clip. Shout out to that patron for sending us this. I don't know where we're jumping in on it at, but I guarantee you it's going to have amazing wisdom. Let's take a listen in to James Baldwin.
That's the only thing they have to know. If they know this, everything else I say is a lie. They know they would not like to be black here. They know that. Now they know that, and they're telling me lies. They're telling me and my children nothing but lies.
For Baldwin, the truth is that the ghettos of his youth remain, gnawing at the spirit of those who live there.
The poverty is piled high, making it even more inescapable. And making it even more inescapable how thoroughly you're despised. The high-rise slum becomes a high-crime area almost at once, because what are you going to do with all these children, really? Whole families condemned forever to nothing in the richest city in the world.
Let's hold it right there. Hold it right there for me, David, because if you let me, I would listen to Baldwin for the rest of the day. He speaks about this dichotomy of being the poorest people in the richest city in the world. He spoke about that in Go Tell It on the Mountain. He spoke about it regularly throughout his work. That paradigm has not changed. We are Black people in the most powerful empire in the history of the planet, and I think, Brother Mack, I think we should be thoroughly aware of what that really means. Not only will they control the narrative, not only will they control the history, but they'll use brute force. I mean, they've done it. They literally did it. That's how we're here. They use brute force to bring us here. We are seated in the strongest and the most powerful empire in the history of the planet, and we are Black at the bottom. Of every measurable metric, you're going to find Black people at the bottom. That is not happenstance. They want us to believe that it is some indictment of our character, but it is systemic, and it is how the system is designed, and history and controlling history is a part of that. Speak to that for me, Brother Mack.
Well, I mean, I'm listening to Sister Ford, and everything is so connected. Sister Ford, for you to tell us, about the atrocities in Minnesota and the way that they've happened, to even open up this level of thought of who's owning our history. I'm just so, you've created so many thoughts running through my mind about why it is so important for us to tell our story, and be accurate about it. So it's so obvious to me, and you fed me so much this morning, sister. So just thank you. And I don't know what else to say, brother, because Sister Ford has just overloaded my soul. So
I appreciate that. And the feeling is mutual. I think that, the beautiful thing about this space is that we are all calling in from different parts of the country and all living through 2020 and 2021 in our own ways, right? Affected in different ways, and with different area of expertise. And so I have been extremely fed by the understanding of history that I feel like, why didn't I learn in school? Why didn't we have this context of December 6th and what Juneteenth is, and who that's really for, just people in Texas, and so the feeling is absolutely mutual. And I think that for me, when I look at what is my role, right? What is my role in this day, and how can I play a part in not allowing us to continue to go through this cycle? And you look at media. Yes, we focused on the criminal justice system because of what happened to George Floyd. We've really focused on police accountability, and we've really, really focused on the importance of voting, right? And all of the attacks with voter suppression and everything. But for me, and being a journalist, I continuously remind people the importance of media and how media is playing a role in all of this stuff. And for you, with your expertise being in history, that's the only way in 20, 30 years from now, people are going to know the history of today, is how it was recorded. And so there is so much intersection in all the work that we're doing. We heard so many people in Minnesota because of the magnitude of George Floyd and it happening here, and this being the epicenter or ground zero. And then right after that, then you had Dalal Eid, which a lot of people didn't know about, and then Dante Wright, and then Winston Smith. So it's like, it's still happening. You have so many people who are here saying, well, I just don't know what I can do. It doesn't matter what your profession is. There is something that you can do.
That's it.
You know,
that's it.
Use what you got. Start where you are. Do what you can. Everybody can play a role in activating change in our country.
Well, listen, I want to thank both of you, Georgia Fort and Brother Carl Mack, for coming in. And Georgia, you've been sitting with, you start us off every morning at 8 o'clock with On the Clock. So thank you for hanging out and helping with Rebecca being out of the way. And Brother Mack, we try to get you around here as often as we can, because as I like to say, you may not be their historian, but you are our historian. So thank you both so much. We're going to end the stream a little bit early today. Because I kind of want the conversation to resonate with James Baldwin during Pride Month, at the tail end of Pride Month. One of the things you said, Georgia, was whether or not they kept this in the vaults because of his sexuality, which during the time it totally 100% feasible that he would suffer another layer of oppression in this country because of his sexuality. But the level of brilliance that brother, just exuded, from his pores. I don't know what he said to these young black kids in this clip, but I know it was brilliant. Let's play that, and then we'll be back tomorrow. DJ Exclusive will be back tomorrow. Rebecca will be back next week. Professor Mack and Georgia, as often as you are available, this platform is yours. You are family. As far as I'm concerned, you're part of the show. So y'all come back tomorrow. Y'all can come back Friday, whatever day is best for you. That said, David, let's close off here with James Baldwin sharing his wisdom. And I want everyone to just think about how important it is that we teach our own children our history.
He spoke at the Police Athletic League in Harlem.
A writer might be a dancer, might be a carpenter, might be architect, might be a junkie, might be any number of things.
You think there's still a chance for today's black writer?
There never was a chance for a black writer. Come, what's your name? Jeffrey. Listen, a writer, black or white, doesn't have much of a chance, right? Nobody wants a writer until he's dead. But to answer your real question, there's a greater chance for the black writer today than there ever has been.
The children asked him the same question I wanted answered. Why did he move to Paris?
Paris is very important to me because I was able to, I was able to take a deep breath, and I was able, this may sound a very corny way to put it, but I wanted to find out where being black ended, where I began, or vice versa. I mean, that some things had happened to me because I was Jimmy, and some things had happened to me because I was black. And I wanted to find out how to get these things together, because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life going around saying, you treat me that way because I'm black.
After attaining worldwide acclaim as a black writer, Baldwin wrote Giovanni's Room, an explicitly homosexual love story. His publishers in New York refused to print it for fear of alienating his newly acquired white, middle-class audience. Baldwin was furious and took the book to England for publication.
You published Giovanni's Room very early on in your...
I finished the book in 55.
And that, to deal with homosexuality was difficult. And you already were dealing with, black writer. Mm-hmm. What made you decide to do that?
Well, one can say almost that I didn't have an awful lot of choice. It was something... Giovanni's Room comes out of something which tormented and frightened me, the question of my own sexuality. I used to know when I was younger, a great many men, boys, who were so terrified that they might have a homosexual and, they might be bisexual, or they might, want to go, want to go to bed with a man. You might be able to fall in love with a man. And they were so frightened of that they could never fall in love with anybody else. They were so frightened of men they couldn't touch women. Giovanni June comes somewhere out of that.
Did you also feel that you wanted to get it on the record, your own homosexuality, early?
I don't know if that, well, I don't know if I wanted to get it on the record, but I wanted to confront it. I'm very glad that, that was done, because it also simplified my life in another way, because it meant that I had no secrets. Nobody could blackmail me. You didn't tell me, I told you.
James Baldwin is one of those lucky people who's never been unsure of his family's love.
Stay and just repeat it now. Yeah, oh, we dream about all things being alright, but we freeze when it's all up to us. So let's fight it, make a stand and try it. Everything will matter from now on. Let's fight it, there's no way to hide it, 'cause everything will matter from now on, 'cause it's high tide. And I know that it's alarming, yeah. 'Cause time is running out, and we can't just stay and watch it, no. Oh, we dream about all things being alright, but we freeze when it's all up to us. So let's fight it, make a stand and try it. Everything will matter from now on. Matter from now on. Let's fight it, there's no way to hide it, 'cause everything will matter from now on, 'cause it's high tide. Yeah, we must fight it now, 'cause nothing else matters from now on. It's high tide.
Could really use a change of scenery. Everybody smoking all the greenery. Close the match 'cause they were handed down to me. But I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Pills to make the man, but that poison's gonna chew you from the inside out. So right now, say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free. 'cause you proved to me that rising to the top was my destiny. And you can see whatever from behind me, but I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Clothes to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. From the inside out, it's time to say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to run it out. It's your time, oh. If you're on the bus, say yeah. Yeah. If you're on the train, say yeah. Yeah. If you gotta walk, say yeah.